Oh, man, I'll tell y'all what. This was a weekend to remember, not just for MFFLs, but for the Boston Celtics and knocking off the former NBA champions in the Milwaukee Bucks. But when you talk about epic proportions and when you talk about lopsided games, both um, both games had it, and both games showed a relentlessness in these two teams coming from what seemed like nothing at the start of a new year, and they came well away with something to be proud of. What is up, Bird brothers and sisters? Lindy End Zone is in the building for the touchdown, taking the lead for the Philadelphia Eagles, one video at a time. And yes, I introduced myself as such, and while I don't do content anymore for my beloved Dallas Mavericks, I still have to bring them into conversation, and specifically so for this video presentation. The gentleman to my right on the screen, as I am pointing the opposite direction because of the camera, um, the two of us have done a off-season video in the past analyzing the new beginnings of um, both of our separate fandoms of our basketball teams, and really assessing from that point where we thought that the Mavericks and Celtics were going to go. And while it looked very bleak at one point in time, I can't tell you how damn proud I am of my Mavs, and I have to imagine that uh, Jordy over here can't tell you enough how darn proud, as I as I put the names up here, so y'all know who the hell he is. But I'm sure Jordy cannot tell you enough how darn proud he is of the Boston Celtics. And the reason I say that is because that, well, as we've seen towards the beginning, almost the halfway point of the season, Jordy, and this was before the All-Star break because it was at least a month away from this point in time. When January 1st rolled around, both teams were at a record of under 500. Now, granted, it was by one win. They were, 17 and 18 to 17 and 19 respectively on December 31st. And to make the turnaround that both teams did to get to the point where Boston is the 2 seed in the East and the Mavericks are the 4 seed in the West, and facing two conference powerhouses, for Dallas facing the Golden State Warriors and the Celtics facing the Miami Heat. I don't know if either of us seen this coming for both of our basketball teams.
Yeah, I mean, it was very unexpected, especially like you said earlier in the year. There was a teeter tottering of back and forth for both of our teams, and then all of a sudden, something clicked, and each team would hit its stride. And it means a lot for a team to do that because not
Mm-hmm.
many teams can do it. You'll see a team here or there every year, and it's a special thing to see if it's your team. And I think we can both be happy with the leaps and bounds they took, especially in the last series alone.
Yeah, man, it's no kidding. And I reflect back on the stream that we had in the off season, in which both teams went through head coaching changes. When you seen Brad Stevens step down and take an executive role for Boston, and them inserting Ime Udoka as the head coach, part of that Greg Popovich tree, a very defensive minded coach that that kind of kept kind of kept the theme of what Brad Stevens brought to the team defensively, but he added a multiplier to it. He kind of went, okay, well, let's double the intensity here, and what he has created over there, getting and getting the most out of not just his stars, but the role players that have been there, and watching what Marcus Smart did this regular season, and bringing back an Al Horford who was a couple of years older, that looked like he wasn't that guy anymore when the Sixers had him, and then battling the injuries of Robert Williams, and people coming in at the right points in time, and watching that. I forget his name off the top of my head, but I think it's Grant Williams.
Yes.
Him hitting seven threes out of nowhere in that closeout game seven against Milwaukee in your house, for the Celtics to play the way that they did. Wow, I mean, it's just a testament to them buying in to what Udoka in his first year as the Celtics head coach, buying in to what he wanted. Even when the season wasn't going according to plan earlier in the year, and the turnaround that they made to go through what they did, it was pretty astonishing. It had to have been pretty astonishing to watch.
Yeah, because I mean, coming in, Ime really didn't have that many connections. He did have some. He had the one to Jason Tatum through Team USA. He had known Peyton Pritchard, and he had connection here and there. And coming in, it was like an okay, we see the connections he can make and the tree he comes from. What can he do? And at first, as expected, it was rocky. And that's balanced with an injury here and there. COVID hit the league, and it was just like, all right, we have to work with this. And slowly, you just saw the Celtics start to pull it off. Because Tatum and Brown, obviously, they're going to fall back into their normal form. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Tatum is moving the ball a little bit more at times, which I'm very glad he does. Same thing with Brown. And that's something that has worked out to their success at times. Not so much like in, I think it was game three, I want to say, where Tatum was 4 for 20. But
Mm-hmm.
they've really stepped up and put themselves in a good position. Plus, like you said, the role players have stepped up. Marcus Smart, he's bringing his all on both sides of the ball, and he's known as an aggressive defender. It's what Ime has really kind of tried to instate. You had Derek Williams come in mid-season, who isn't necessarily the best shooter, but that's what you've got guys like Peyton Pritchard for, where he stepped up and said, all right, I'm just going to shut people down on defense. And I was a little worried when they dealt Langford, but now with how Derek White's played, I'm fine with it. It worked out. And that was another worry, was how would Brad Stevens handle bringing guys in, stuff like that, because it's hard to live up to Danny Ainge. He's done it so far. He's done stuff that I would look at Danny Ainge and go, you may or may not have done that if you were still here. And they've just developed so many guys that have worked out this year. Robert Williams, in the limited time he's played. Al Horford came back, and earlier in the year, I was saying Al Horford in his time in Boston had one of his best years since
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta. And I said, if there's a time for him to come in and go back to that level, it's now. And I heard a few Sixers fans saying, oh, well, it's Al Horford. He dropped off after he came to Philly. He proved everybody wrong. And I'm happy. It's like we haven't seen a team turn around this fast in years. And I'm so glad it's happened.
But it was also great. It was also great at times to still have Daniel Tice to back up Horford. So you had a good tandem there. You had a good tandem there in the front court. To keep both guys as fresh as possible in the rotations.
Yeah, and Tice was a player where I was, again, it's another one of those moves where I was kind of skeptical. Like, all right, if it works out, if it does what you think it's going to do, more power to you. But if it doesn't, I'm a little worried. And that worked out too. Because, like you said, he was a good pairing. And when they really set those two up with the injuries to Robert Williams and then Grant Williams stepping up, the balance between those four, I haven't really seen much like it in a long time, maybe even at all.
Yeah. And I tell you what, in talking about Danny Ainge and the executives and the executive and personnel decisions, and that's one thing that's one thing that I was thinking to myself as well going into the off season and wondering the kind of executive decisions that was going to happen, and the Mavs letting go of Donnie Nelson and Bob Vulgaris, which I'm kind of happy that Vulgaris is gone, because I think he had a lot to do with the team construction, and well, we seen what ultimately happened during the trade deadline, which I will get to in a second. But one of the bigger topics of discussion at that point was, okay, well, it looked a little bit controversial when the Mavs decided to give Jason Kidd a chance as a head coach again. And while he didn't have, all that much success and with the Nets and then Milwaukee, because there was a mix of wording going on there as to how good or how bad of a coach Kidd was, and Giannis being one of the guys that has vouched for him on a couple of occasions. I grew a little bit weary on the decision, but I gave it a chance at the same time because he did show success as part of the coaching staff on that championship winning team with the Lakers in the during the bubble. Call it what you will, with there's an asterisk next to it, but nonetheless it happened, and he was a part of that staff. And going into this, well, I was connecting the dots a little bit and talking about, well, okay, he has quite a bit of a connection with the Mavericks organization. He was a part of that championship team in 2011, and he was, he was still quite the facilitator for that team that they needed at that point in time, to mesh with Dirk the way he did, and having the role players and coming in and out, and Vince Carter being there for a point in time. You had Vince, and you had Sean Marion and Tyson Chandler, just naming a few. Jason Terry was still there. So, and knowing that there was still an established connection and the respect that he had for the organization and vice versa, it calmed me down a little bit, but I still had my reservations. Considering the history that Rick Carlisle had and what he had developed over the years as the head coach for the Dallas Mavericks, and the longevity that he has produced there. Now, well, granted, he did get us our only championship in 2011, but nonetheless, it just seemed year after year that his time was starting to run out, and it really showed at a point in time that, well, Kid's voice was starting to register with these players a little bit. He was giving them a bit more of a defensive challenge, and well, the script started to flip a little bit, and you see that, well, if you can't have it, if you can't have it both ways, the teeter totter is going to go in whatever direction it goes. Based on where the priority is. So the team sacrifices a little bit of offense, and then they add a little bit to the defense, and at times it worked and at times it didn't, to where we talked about earlier with the Celtics and the Mavs having a similar record in the fresh year 2022. Come January 1st, they were both under 500, but the job didn't seem done at that point in time. And granted, Luka came in. Luka came in fat. I'll just, I got to be blunt about it, because I was just as irritated as a lot of MFFLs were. He came in out of shape. He came in overweight. He wasn't himself, and this was the second year in a row I'm watching this, and I said, man, If you're going to be the guy, if you are going to be the face of the franchise, you need to show better representation. And I really appreciate Coach Kidd for for standing his ground, not backing down, and take this team and like, guess what? We could have something special here. Um, and then the trade deadline comes. Here we go. And as much at that point, well, before I get into my opinions, and I have to hear it from the other side of the fence in the East, and what you initially thought at that point in time when the Mavs traded Porzingis to Washington, and then they take on the contracts of Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Like, what were your initial reaction at that point in time?
At first, it was a thing of like, oh, Porzingis is gone. Now they don't. That was their second guy. That was their guy besides Luca. That was like their pairing, quote unquote. And then taking on those two contracts, it was all right. You've got space to take on the money. We'll see what happens. It was one of those things where it was like a little bit of skepticism and worry, but also there's probably more to it. So wait and see. And as it's played out, Dimwitty's been doing somewhat of a good job, and I mean it. In a way, it worked out. I haven't checked up on Porzingis recently, so I can't tell fully how it worked out. But from this side of the fence, it's like at this point, if you needed to get rid of him, you got rid of him. It was not much lost, not much gained.
No, and as much as I wanted to give him another chance going into that off season, and we've talked about it on the stream, and I'm sure you recall me talking about KP and where he was going into this season, and I said, well, for the first 2 years, he has not had the chance from a health standpoint to be on the court long enough to develop some kind of basketball chemistry with Luka, because that's not necessarily something you can develop fully in practice or scrimmages, pickup games, what have you. That's built upon in the regular season and in actual situations, in actual crunch time moments, knowing where you need to be at this point in the game, at this specific time, when I call on you, when I call your number.
Mm-hmm.
And again, and it's just the carousel spins once more, and it's like, here we go, deja vu all over again. Either it's the knee or the back, some kind of aggravation. It, it's a shame for a player his age, like 20s, 26 years old or so, for to continue to go through these kinds of injuries. It's just the sustainability was not there anymore, and they take on the trade for Dinwiddie and Bertans, and all I heard is that the Mavericks were a joke. What are they doing? They're taking on two expensive contracts for worse players when they could have kept Porzingis and see where he would have been when he was healthy again. And the Mavericks have no idea what they're doing, and well, they seem to know what they're doing if they made it to the Western Conference Finals. So I mean, at this point, the joke's on you for the people to have said that the Mavericks were a joke for doing this in the first place. And I've said it before. The problem is for that Mavericks offense, there wasn't enough. If I can use alphas, I don't think there was enough alphas. Porzingis wasn't an alpha to me, where if I needed Luka off the ball or I needed him on the bench to get a rest, I can trust that other player with the ball in his hands to make the correct plays and just take command when your general is off the court. Porzingis was not that guy, and he didn't prove it enough over the period of time that he was a Dallas Maverick, and injuries set him back. But when you condense it and look at the roster at what Luka has now, well, he's got a bunch of role players that, granted, they're not all-star caliber, but they're good at what they do, and they more so enhance Luka's abilities instead of instead of exploiting Luka's weaknesses. So one of Luka's biggest weaknesses was on the defensive side of the ball. When you got, now when you add Reggie Bullock in the mix, and you add Spence, and you add a Dinwiddie, you add a Bertans, and you pair them with Finney Smith, you pair them with Brunson, you pair them with Kleba, you got a lot of aggressive defenders to throw at somebody. And, well, that's how the Suns got victimized towards the end of the series, especially in Game 6 and Game 7. You didn't see a team attack Chris Paul and Devin Booker the way the Mavs did. And that's just a testament to using the right people at the right time and having them bought into that defensive mindset. And credit to the organization, credit to Nico Harrison for getting this done, and to make it as attractive enough as a trade in the first place to, you know not just better your team when everyone else didn't think so, but put them in a better position going forward when you want to add another star-studded player to this Mavs lineup.
Yeah, and I mean that's what they need to do is get those guys to help out on defense. I mean, it's kind of like the situation Boston was in with you had Romeo Langford backing up at the shooting guard spot, and it was like we've got all these shooters, but no defenders, and it reminded me of back when we had guys like Gordon Hayward and all them because we had a lot of spot up shooters, not much defense. It was in a way that same thing, and then you see Derek White was brought in at the deadline. You saw Al Hortford was brought in before the season. Tice was brought in before the season. It was like you're putting those guys in there to help out Tatum, to help out Brown. So Brown doesn't have to go back and just play as hard on defense and be one of three people doing it. And so Tatum's not the only guy taking shots from the backcourt or from the front court. So it's like we kind of did the same thing you guys did, but a little less emphasis on defense and more just getting those big men to help out Tatum.
Oh yeah, and that's going to be put on an even better display going into the Eastern Conference Finals. So to wrap up the presentation here, and it's flowing along pretty well. I was hoping to try and keep it at a maximum of 30 minutes, and we're doing a pretty good job of that. But to wrap it up and put a bow on this, to put a very positive bow on this to where our teams are right now, we'll start with Boston first, respectively. Miami Heat stand in their way of making a finals appearance. The number one Eastern Conference team in Miami that has had, quite the turnaround in staying relevant after the finals, excuse me, after the finals loss to the Lakers back in the bubble. Stuff doesn't really go in their favor last year with Milwaukee taking the crown, and then now they're back at it again. Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, that big three that they got going on there, and now you got two defensive powerhouses trying to attack each other. And, well, what so in your humble estimation, based on how this series is going to go, all bias aside, because this is probably going to be one of the toughest tests for the Celtics in the East. I don't know if it's going to be much of a defensive battle, more so than it's going to be an offensive battle, because as far as I'm concerned, I think the Celtics have more offensive firepower than the Heat do. I know Jimmy Buckets puts on a hell of a show at any given point in time. Kyle Lowry to this point's not much of a scorer like he used to be when he was tandem with DeMar DeRozan back in his Raptor days. Bam is just that you know, Bam is just that force in the middle that's really going to try to contain the glass and be there when necessary for putbacks or easy layups when he's having to work on Horford and Daniel Tice. But are you seeing more of an offensive or defensive battle here?
I think it comes down to offensive because defensively, these teams match up in a way that's like you said, this is two powerhouses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to come down a lot to what can each team do to get their shooters open and dropping shots. Now, the Celtics do a lot of off-ball stuff. They love to do screens. They love to do shifty stuff to get their guys open, whether that be on behind the arc or in the paint. They love to do it. So I'm thinking you're going to see a lot of that. So the Celtics took, I want to say it was the third most three-pointers in a single series against the Bucks, and I think it will be no different
Mm-hmm.
this series because one of Boston's best qualities is if we can't defend you, we're going to outshoot you. Because with how Tatum has been recently, Brown, Smart, and if let's say Pritchard or Grant Williams or another role player can step up, I think it's going to be Miami's chance, or it's going to be Miami going, well, how do we keep up with that? But it's going to be very tough. We're going to have to hope that Jimmy Butler stays the way he has been recently because he hasn't been shooting his best shots, but I don't know. It all depends on what their bench. I think it's going to come down to the benches and who shoots better.
Sounds fair enough, honestly, but I have to imagine when you look at the Celtics offensively, just the just the firepower that Tatum, Jalen Brown, and Marcus Smart have combined. Not even considering the bench, if the Heat let them attack early, they're going to be in for a late fight. Now that's where the defense is going to come in as well. I think it's going to be a pick your poison type of matchup for the Heat where who are you going to want to limit the most? If you limit Tatum, then Jalen Brown can pick it up. If you limit Jalen Brown, vice versa, but then you have to deal with Marcus Smart, who is very productive on both sides of the court. So, man, but the Heat can still match that very well because the Celtics have I don't know if the Celtics necessarily have anyone that can proficiently guard Jimmy Butler. And I also don't know how well they're going to be able to defend Bam this time. Now, granted they have Al Horford and Daniel Tice to match up on him, but it's not like we're talking about in in contrast to Bam versus DeAndre Ayton, for example. Bam Bam's a different player. He has a different mindset. He's more aggressive. DeAndre Ayton has proven to be soft in this series with the way he was playing, and you heard in the post game conference with Monty Williams after the Suns got a butt whooping by my Mavs that there's some pretty bad in stuff going on internally, and I just don't think DeAndre Ayton has the drive that a guy like Bam does, especially with Bam being involved with the U.S. Olympic team and how good of a center he is. So I think that's just where the Celtics are going to come into trouble from a offensive standpoint with the way that the Heat play defense. But they, I think the Heat are just going to have a hard time picking and choosing on who they want to limit depending on how the game is going against the Celtics.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see a lot of jumping between Smart and probably Derek White on Jimmy Butler because White was brought in to be your defender alongside Smart at the other guard spot. It's worked so far, and I think it can work still, but it's about how they guard him. I mean, they've used double teams kind of well recently, and I think you'll see a lot of that again, but I also worry about double teaming, leaving somebody open because
Mm-hmm.
the deeper you get in the playoffs, the harder it is going to be to do that. So there's that, and then there's the center battle. If Robert Williams is back, I have no doubt you see them throw a lot of different looks with a lot of different personnel setups at the Heat, and I think that could be what trips them up. I'll have to see during game if it really does, but you throw enough looks at anybody, it'll trip them up at some point or another.
Now, if I read correctly, I think it's been said that Robert Williams should be ready to go for Game One. So that is an extra body that the Celtics can throw at Bam. But who knows at this point? I still, I think they have. I think they have an okay enough firepower defensively to throw bodies at Bam, but I just don't know if it's completely enough. But we'll see. And with that said, give me a prediction on who you think is going to come out on top of this and in how many games.
I'm thinking the Heat take it in 7. I mean, my friend who's a Heat fan is going to love that I said that, but I'm taking the Heat in 7 only because I think Jimmy Butler, something will click and he'll just go off and he'll push the series to its Game 7. Now,
Ooh.
Game 7s can go either way. It's always been like that. We've seen a lot of crazy things happen, but I think the Heat managed to sneak this one in just because the Celtics have shown me that sometimes when they get tired, they get reckless. It happened a lot earlier in the season where I'm sitting here watching my TV with 2 minutes left in the fourth going, I remember when we had a lead. It was great. We don't have nearly as much of a lead anymore. And then the game ends and it's like, yeah, that lead went by fast.
Man, yeah, that's crazy. No, you're so you're not as confident as in your C's as I thought. I would have thought that you would have taken your Celtics in 7 games, especially with them already taking down the supposed number one player in the NBA in Giannis. Now, granted, people are going to try and downplay that because he did not have Chris Middleton, who is probably the ultimate X factor in terms of what the Bucks do offensively and taking a lot of heat off of Giannis because that's just another offensive playmaker that the Bucks did not have. But still, Giannis gave the Celtics all they could handle, and they just didn't have enough at the end, in terms of firepower to be able to knock out Boston. And, well, I think the Heat are better equipped. So I guess to move on here as we're approaching the end of this, I'm going to touch on my maths just quickly here, but I have to hear it from the other side of the fence once more, and watch in you watching where Luka was early in the year, from his transformation of being as out of shape as he was to now taking his team to the Eastern Conference Finals in the fashion that he has, and knowing that, and this is the craziest thing to me, the top 5 players in MVP voting, the 4 above Luka are all now eliminated. Luka's the only one still standing. Where you had Jokic, Embiid, trying to think who was. I'm trying to think who was number 3. I can't remember now. There was. Wow, I can't remember, but it was Jokic, Embiid, Devin Booker was 4. Um, it was Giannis was 2 actually. So it was Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid. They were 2 and 3. Devin Booker was 4. Luka was 5. All of them eliminated except for Luka, and I'm just I'm just asking for that time to put some respect on this kid's name. And at 23 years old, what he has done for the organization up to this point, and out of 4 seasons, 3 of them he has taken his team to the playoffs. Now, we already know what happened the rookie year, but year 2, year 3, year 4, to be in consistent playoff contention and to finally get over the hump of round 1, in which they dispatch the Utah Jazz, and they get to the best team in the NBA in the regular season, who was 8 wins clear of the Memphis Grizzlies, who was 11 games clear of the Miami Heat. He gets rid of them in 7 games because, well, let's be real about this. The Suns weren't careful in what they wished for. They mocked Luka, called it the Devin Booker, called it the Luka special, and flopping like Luka and turning to the camera, smirking and winking. Well, they didn't seem to learn their lesson, did they? As they got blown out on their home court in such embarrassing fashion, and now who gets the last laugh and gets to face a arguably as tough opponent in the Golden State Warriors, who I think, in my opinion, will be a better test for this Dallas Mavericks team just because of their elevated championship pedigree that the Phoenix Suns did not have.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at what Luka's done. Suns fans, a lot of it was I don't want to say arrogance, but in a way arrogance, just because they were here last year. They were expecting a full on push to the finals again, and it was like Dallas was just a pit stop. That's what you get when you underestimate a team. I know
Mm-hmm.
they themselves weren't overlooking Dallas, but I know the fans were, and it's one of those things where it's like you can never underestimate a team. It doesn't matter if it's the Pistons or it's the Warriors. You don't underestimate a team. And that's one thing that can really take out a team. So it it also is a testament to how Luka has grown over the year and has grown over his career. He's been pushing playoffs where a lot of other players wouldn't be able to. It's something I can only really compare it to someone like a Giannis who's really pushed his team recently to the playoffs because he's really helping pull Dallas through the playoffs. Even though they've got a lot of talented players, a lot of talented coaching and stuff like that, Luka's been the face and he's lived up to it. And dare I say, he's really pulled them like he's trying to play like he's Dirk, and it's never a bad day to be compared to Dirk.
No. No, especially the representation of what Dirk did for that franchise and staying loyal for 2 decades on end is just um, it's just unbelievable. I mean, Dirk was one of the first guys that Luca went to after the win, and the bond and the relationship that they have developed when Luca came in here as a rookie. I'm sorry, but how did the Mavericks get blessed to go from Dirk Nowitzki to Luka Doncic just like that? I mean, in all seriousness, how does something like that happen? you can't help but you can't help but think how blessed this team has been to, to be in this situation, to have two faces of the franchise like that, and I'm just hoping and praying that Luka has the same, that he has the same loyalty as Dirk had, and going forward, this has been an amazing journey to see this team bounce back the way they did, much like the Celtics have in the East. And granted, I mean, for the Mavs to be the 4 seed in, well, let's keep it 100 here. For the Mavs to be the 4 seed in the tougher conference just speaks for itself, and it also speaks to the evolution that Jason Kidd, what he has done in redeeming himself as a head coach, and buying into the culture that he has known to be, championship caliber back in 2011. What he has done for this basketball team, what Ime Udoka has done for the Boston Celtics. I mean, when you put two and two together, it almost seems like the same story in a different book. If that makes as much sense as I can possibly make it, but
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless, I mean, it's just been. I don't think either of us expected this kind of result when we had our stream in the beginning. But it has been such a journey to watch these teams get to this point and knock off the opponents that were in their way. So, to finally put a bow on this, I got to give my prediction now. And I'm trying not to be biased about it, but I have to take into consideration that the Mavs dispatched the best team in basketball in the regular season. It took them 7 games to do it. Now you can put asterisks on that all you want. That DeAndre Ayton had limited minutes in Game 7, and Chris Paul trying to say that he was playing through a quad injury. I don't want to hear any of those excuses. Y'all were talking all that crap during the beginning of the series when you were up 2-0, and we heard Suns in four, Suns in four. Y'all didn't stay true to your convictions. So, for them to knock off Utah, which was still impressive. Yeah, it wasn't a first round matchup like the Clippers were when they had them 2 years in a row. Granted, it wasn't, but the Mavs still got it done, especially in Luka's absence. Jalen Brunson stepping up, Spencer Dinwiddie stepping up when he needed to, Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, all those three-point shooters that the Mavs have still making 20-plus threes in a single game at clips of 45% or more. I mean, the impressiveness that they displayed, especially mimicking the way that they faced the Clippers the first two go-arounds, and just to continue on that aggressive grit. Um, and they go into this series against a Golden State Warriors team that has been there and done that. They're going against the Warriors team that now has Klay Thompson back. They go against the Warriors team that Kevon Looney has been looking better. Uh, Andrew Wiggins stepping up when they needed him, especially in games where Steph wasn't Steph Curry. Draymond Green is the usual anchor of that offense and defense. It's not gonna. It's not gonna be any easier. It's not gonna be any easier than it was against Phoenix. But I still think Dallas can get it done. It's probably going to take 7 games again, maybe 6, but I think it's going to take 7. Um, Golden State Golden State kind of caught a break with the Grizzlies not having Ja, and Dylan Brooks getting ejected for 2 games, and John Morant not being there for 4 games. Golden State caught a break, and if I can say predictably that Dallas could potentially blindside them by being as healthy as they are, knock on wood. Um, I I still think the Mavs can get it done, and ultimately being that the Mavericks have Luka Doncic and the Warriors don't. because even Golden State, they don't have anyone that can stop Luka. Much like the Suns could not stop him. So I'm gonna have to say I still think my Mavs can take Golden State in 7 games.
Hmm. Yeah, I I think I'm gonna have to agree with that because, like you said, I don't think they'll be able to stop Luca. We've seen what teams can do against players they can't stop, especially even during these playoffs. Early when Tatum couldn't handle Giannis, he took over games. Then, as soon as they figured out how to handle him, it was game over. But it was still very close. I don't think the Warriors are going to be able to handle him because they really don't have somebody that can step up as of right now and go, yeah, I can challenge you. So all you got to do is have Luka do his thing and try to limit everybody on the Warriors side as much as possible, whether it be Clay or Steph or whoever. And I think that Dallas can definitely do that. I think they've got the right role players to do it. It's just about how much they really want it.
Yep, absolutely. And well, granted, Golden State doesn't have anybody to stop Luka, but if they start to double him, then well, they can do homework on the Mavericks' previous matchups. And then from that point on, it's going to come down to the role players. Can Brunson, Dinwiddie, Finney Smith, can those guys stay as consistent as they have been up to this point in providing another offensive spark to help their superstar? That's going to be one of the biggest factors in how the Mavs play this series. So, with that, man, can never seem to keep a schedule on how long these presentations go on for, whether it's a stream or a video, with this one being as long as it is. But nonetheless, we needed to take the necessary time to catch up on both of our teams excuse me, as we did in the offseason and analyzing where we thought the Mavericks and Celtics were going to go. And lo and behold, they're both in the same situation on either side of their conference fences, battling out to try and make it to the big dance. And good luck to your Celtics. Um, you know, and well, I think that's just going to about do it for this presentation as we looked back on a weekend to remember and we looked back on a stream to remember, analyzing where we thought the Mavericks and Celtics were going to be. And well, I think it's safe to say that both of our teams exceeded expectations. And, um, you know, this was a great look back on our stream history at the beginning of the NBA season. So I wanted to thank you, Jordy, for your time in creating this video presentation, and for those stopping by to watch, whether it's all 48 to 50 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever, what have you. Hope you watch. I hope you listen to the entire presentation. But if you manage to skip to the end or whatever and cut this off soon, cut it early, please do be sure to check out Jordy Fighter's channel where he has multiple podcasts going on. Whether it's for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish or the Philadelphia Eagles with the Common Flock, or Boston Celtics Fighter from Three, or talking with Papa Sore about the Florida Gators. He gives you enough of an array of entertainment to keep you entertained. So that'll do it for this video presentation. This has been Lindy Endzone for my Dallas Mavs, and that has been Jordy Fighter for the Boston Celtics. We thank y'all once again for hanging out with us to watch this video. And with that, go MFFLs. Get her done for the Boston Celtics. Hashtag bleed green. Not for the Eagles. That's for Boston. Have a good night, everybody, and we will see you next time. Take care.